Hello, good people everywhere. Yes, we are recording. Well, I'm Matthew Drake. It's good to be back with you. I'm embarking on something a new journey to help people. And I'm going to talk about my goals before diving into this little podcast. Christ, Culture, and Excellence. I'm going to be interpreting the Bible chapter by chapter from a nationalist, from a philosophy perspective. I'm going to give my own thoughts. I probably don't fit in with a lot of other Christians, and I also don't fit in with a lot of atheists. So I don't know really what to call myself, but you'll have to listen to find out, I guess. What inspired me to do this? Well, you may recall a couple of years ago, Dr. Jordan Peterson doing a lecture series on the Bible, and I really liked that, even though in many ways I despise what Dr. Peterson stands for. It was kind of addicting, kind of titillating to hear his musings on Genesis. Of course, he didn't get very far into the Bible, as you all know, and I was disappointed by that. So I'm hoping that I don't give up quite so easily. And there are something like 1,100 chapters in the Bible, so this could potentially, if I do one a week or something, it could potentially be a 20-year project. Man, I'll be much older by that time. But yeah, the Bible's a long book, and why is this important today? Why am I doing this? Well, like I said, I want to help people, and I look at the factions on the right, and I think to myself, well, if things keep going as they are, really the alt-right and what I would call, I think Gavin deemed it the trad right, the America Firsters, Nicholas Fuentes, and others like him, well, they're really going to fail, I believe, because they are not aligned with each other, and they both have these crucial things to bring to the table. The atheist nationalists out there, the problem with that is that they lack the religious zeal. And this is a criticism that E. Michael Jones has lobbed, and I think it's a valid criticism. There's also just things like a lot of these guys seem to be a little bit autistic, whereas their counterparts, the trad right, optics cucks, if you will, they have a better presentation, frankly, and I think that's going to be crucial for winning over masses and gaining popular ground and so on. However, these America Firsters and so on, a lot of them are afraid to fight on racial lines. Not all of them, but I think what this podcast can bring for that crew would be more of a grounding in reality and philosophy. So, yeah, we're going to be taking it apart chapter by chapter. Let's just get into it then. So Genesis 1, this is the first book of Moses. By the way, I'm going to be This is just the Revised Standard Version, which, some people will have criticisms with the more international versions or so on, but I like my Bible to be more accessible, at least for this purpose. There's a time and a place for the Shakespearean type denseness that comes with some of these, like King James versions and so on. Chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, stop. So right here, we're differentiating, quite a few things, right? So it's a singular God, so we know it's monotheistic here. And also in the beginning, which means it's a linear timeline. So this is in contrast to perhaps pagan religions where you have multiple gods. Obviously the Hindu religion where you have ideas of reincarnation. So it's setting itself apart, and some people will criticize that. This is just a desert religion or whatever. Well, it's not really a desert religion. I don't see this as a bad thing though, because what I would like to get away from is the idea of magic, right? I think it's important for people to be spiritual, but not superstitious. All right, we, as Christians and religious people, our goal is not to be superstitious. It's to accurately assess reality. But the problem with atheism is that it fails to continue the species. Frankly, there's a lot of data that shows atheists are liberal. They don't have kids. So there's these two realms, which is kind of the intellectual truth of the matter, and also the purpose of the Bible. And perhaps my unique perspective is I don't think the Bible was written. It was meant to be interpreted literally. Now, were there some early founders and writers in the Bible who were true believers and took all of this stuff seriously? Yeah, I'm sure there were. But I think there were also people who maybe went along with it or encouraged it, and for the sake of their tribe, which would be the tribe of Israel. This small little tribe, just through ideas, was able to, well, not just through ideas, obviously. They did a lot of conquering and being conquered, but they were able to maintain their cohesion through these ideas. And so I could see people who weren't actually true believers in this, but in the literal sense, but they saw this as the way of maintaining cohesion, and in a sense, they might have even had some of the interpretations that I have about God, which I'm going to get into, but let's continue. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the face of the waters. Earth was without form and void, so there was darkness and chaos, and the Spirit of God, that right there is implying God is not some corporeal body. It doesn't exclude the possibility, right? It doesn't say God was purely spirit, but it's certainly not saying God walked upon the waters. No, he moved upon the waters. And in my estimation, God is essentially reality, a metaphor for reality. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. So illumination is an important aspect, of course, of order. And as we go through day by day, which, there is no such thing of day as day until you have God. And so a lot of people, the creationists and so on, this debate of evolution or creationism and, frankly, is God real? Well, if you believe that God is synonymous with reality, then by definition, yes, God is real. And there's also an aspect of divinity where God appreciates order. God rewards order. So, creating the day, separating day and night, he's not just letting it all mix together. You get the idea. God separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning one day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." There's this common idea, Jung and others have talked about it. Perhaps Freud, I don't know. Not a big Freud fan, if you might have guessed, but yes, this idea that water is kind of a stand-in for the unconscious, and I think in this case, you could view it as that, like there was just unconsciousness, because he hasn't created any other animals, so there's just this blank void of unconsciousness, and he's creating a firmament. Firmament is just something that kind of a layer, right? And you can stick things into it. You can pass through it sometimes. But this is the important moment where he's drawing that, making it possible for there to be a distinct difference between unconscious and consciousness. Now, of course, if you're interpreting it literally, it might seem odd. It's like he hasn't even created the mind, and well, like I said, God is reality. So it doesn't have to be sequential, even though it's written in that way, because this is the way that reality is ordered, if you will. So what's being described here is how does reality break down? And we see the first thing is light, to bring into, of course, there's nothing to be lit. Right? There's the heavens and the earth, but the earth is without form and void. So, from a scientific perspective, there's no light there's no object to be lit. So what does it even matter if there's light? it does matter, because light is an illumination. It is understanding. That's the first order of the universe. And then there is the firmament and the waters. I'm sorry, it does mention waters before light. So apparently, first thing unconscious, and then light, and then the distinction, which those two things are connected in my mind. Like light, consciousness, you're understanding things by the light that is illuminating the world, illuminating reality. And God made the firmament and separated the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, a second day. Well, this gets into the afterlife, I suppose, right? There's a heaven. And what does that even mean? Well, I would say that it's sort of a collective unconsciousness, to use Jungian terms. And how do you access heaven? Well, some people would say you have to die. I think we sort of access heaven frequently. When we're awake and we get inspiration, we're getting that from somewhere, and I think that's heaven. I think, so for me, heaven is kind of just this unconscious realm, and it's like a dream state or dream world. I've never done lucid dreaming or anything. I did sleepwalk, though, when I was but a tyke. I would sleepwalk. So that is what heaven is to me. And I think when you die, it's not that there's a little ghost that moves away from you and goes up into the sky. There's also I don't think there's a mention of the firmament being in the sky. So I'm not sure where that comes from exactly. Oh, maybe it's in the next part where the lights in the firmament. Anyway. And God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. So again, he's creating more order. Of course, what does order actually mean? Well, it just means basically it's suited toward human beings. And of course, as we'll get to, God created humans in his image, so there must be something human-like about God. It's interesting. We as humans are a part of reality. We're animals and so on, but we're the closest thing to God. And if you're an atheist, you might say, well, that's because we're the most complex. And I would say it's because we're the most ordered. And God is an order kind of above us. So, God, if God is reality, he encompasses those lower levels as well, which is why, a lot of people will ask, how can God let all these bad things happen? Well, he's not a human. He is everything. And so what God cares about is order and laws being obeyed. You don't just get portions of the universe where the laws are completely, different. Now, some people might argue, black holes or something like that. I'm not talking about black holes. That doesn't affect us. So why am I worried about black holes at this point in time? I'm not. Let's continue. This is a book for us. You understand? You're not a brain in a tank. You're not an isolated individual. You're a part of a tribe. So this is a book for our tribe. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind, upon the earth." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding and according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, a third day. Now, why is this? What does goodness have to do with anything? There's no human beings at this point in the story. So how could there be goodness, right? Isn't morality kind of something that is exclusively for humans? Well, as we say, God encompasses humans, so even though he hasn't created them, they're a part of him. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but God, the lesson here is that God, reality, sees order as good. And so by progressing down this chain of more and more order, there is more goodness, which implies, of course, that when we get chaos and destabilization, that is a bad thing. And of course, that's something that humans will, from time to time, bring upon themselves, because, free will and everything. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. Let them be signs and for seasons and for days and years. So, of course, in the old days, right, we would use stars to guide us, and there is this idea of light, right? So there is the light of day, which is from the sun, which, okay, scientifically it's just a star, right? But it's also light, and stars are light. So even back then, they had some understanding that there was a link between stars and sun. That's kind of interesting to me. The stars will guide us, and even during times of darkness, we can look up and take comfort, of course, unless it's cloudy, but we can find our way even in darkness. And it can also give us information about reality and the seasons and the tides and all of these things. So this is why The Bible it's not a scientific book, but it's a science-friendly book. I mean, there's no reason that the Bible and science need to be at odds. And when I say science, I probably should say philosophy. I mean, that's what the physical sciences used to be called. They used to be called different branches of philosophy. And now philosophy is just like some professor moaning on about postmodernism. It's ridiculous. Nothing to do with reality. And it was so, and God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night, sun and moon. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, a fourth day. Notice, too, that God is toiling away during the day. So the day is a time for working, and the night is a time for rest, as that implies. It's kind of like us, huh? And God said, let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly over the earth across the firmament of the heavens. So God created this great sea monsters. So here is, where we get the idea that the sky is the firmament, right? The birds are not flying in the ocean. So that's kind of interesting, because originally there was just the water, and the firmament was dividing the water, and then eventually he created land. He doesn't actually create the air. It's kind of interesting, right? It's almost like he lifts up the firmament when he's making these stars, and almost like the stars themselves are propping up the firmament to create this space which is habitable for humans, which I think is kind of beautiful, because it's like you're really surrounded by water, and we are. So this planet and everything is just such a speck of habitability for us, in a great ocean of uninhabitability. And there's really just this pocket that's been created by kind of God lifting up the firmament and creating space for us. He doesn't create the air so much as he's moving these pieces around, which creates a space for us. And God said, let the water. I read that. So he's creating animals, more order in the universe. Animals are obviously much closer to human beings than humans. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, a fifth day. Now, let's see, okay, so he's already put the vegetation on there. I was worried that my theory was falling apart. No, it is definitely, the order is water, land. Let's go back. water, which is unconscious, firmament, then land, then vegetation, then then lights. Well, I guess, light was first, wasn't it? So water, light, firmament, land, vegetation, birds and fish, and now living creatures. God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. So there are kinds, right? There are, we might call them species, subspecies. And it was so, and God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the cattle according to their kinds, and everything that creeps upon the grounds according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So God didn't create the kinds and then, see the kinds mixing with each other, and he said that was good. No, he created the kinds, and they're separate, and that's good. That's important as nationalists, right? We believe that there is a hierarchy and a diversity even among humans. When I say diversity, I don't mean, you understand what I'm saying. He created us, as Muhammad Ali said, bluebirds fly with bluebirds. He created us the way we are. And it doesn't matter if you think, oh, but what about evolution? It's like, these are metaphors, all right? These are ways of understanding reality that allow us to be fruitful and multiply, as he talks about here, as the Bible talks about. Okay. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." Now, first thing I want to point out is he says, "Let us make God in our image." Wait a second. I thought this was a monotheistic religion. What is going on here? Let us make man in our own image. Now, one theory is that when this religion was created, it was not as popular as it is today. And so they had to reckon with the fact that there were other polytheistic religions out there, and other people had their own gods. And so they get around that, of course, by saying, well, this is the one true God. The other gods are fake. And I interpret that to mean that this is the one God that is in accordance with reality, and these other so-called gods that people have created or devised, Well, these other gods are of course false, and they're basically just magic. They're basically just superstition. And I know you can point to all these things and say, well, in the Bible, the miracles and so on. But, just reading it, the feeling that I get, it's not of a feeling of magic. Whereas this is part of my criticism of a lot of these other, the pagans and so on, these pagan religions. It's just kind of fanciful things, Everything has a spirit. Let's worship this little spirit over here, and let's worship this spirit over here. I mean, I don't know that it actually matters. I don't think this debate is that important to talk about monotheism versus polytheism if you have the view that God/gods just stands for reality. And so, does it matter if you divide reality into lots of different pieces and worship those pieces individually versus if you just worship one God? I prefer to just worship everything because why not? It's everything that's in accordance with reality, which some things are not in accordance with reality. But those things which are, I worship those things. And that aligns me with the world, with reality. The stories, the parables that sometimes include these miracles are told as a way of, metaphors that help our species to grow, because a lot of times what we see out there isn't what we think we see in reality is not actually true, mirages and so on. And so back in the day, they had to create these parables and so on to help people better understand. They didn't, this isn't a science book. It's a manual for life and for civilization. Okay. So here he's created man. God has created man. And he's given us dominion over the fish, the birds, the cattle. So right there, we're more complex, I would say more ordered, and we have a better grasp on reality. Obviously bigger brains too. That helps. And that allows us to have dominion over these things. Now, dominion, it's not necessarily master. He didn't say we're the masters of these things. It just said we have dominion. Now, a father has dominion over his child. But you wouldn't say, the child is a slave to the father. And so we, for all the people concerned about animal cruelty and so on, that's not what this is about, right? He's saying that I've given you all of these creatures, and you have dominion. They are for you to do what you will with. And what is goodness? Well, the goodness is that which preserves the natural order, right? So it wouldn't be a good thing for humans to, say, eradicate another species. And I think that hunting for sport is kind of a sick practice. I think that we should hunt in order to feed ourselves. We should grow food in order to feed ourselves. Now, I also want to pause on this part. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So the Bible repeats this line thrice. And I think that's important. God created man in his own image. And then he flips it. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So he's switching from man, which is a him. They use the word him, and then male and female, he created them, which obviously we know about, Adam and Eve. So man is primary. And this is why the idea that, God is female, it's kind of silly. It's kind of silly. So yeah, he's flipping back and forth between, plural and singular use here. To create a point. Now, this could just be a translation thing. I'm not sure if it's even worth dwelling on that much. But I did want to say, so from my understanding, from my perspective here, you could technically say that man created God. Now, Christians will think that I'm blaspheming here, of course, and I understand what you're saying, but it's kind of like if a portion of God is the Word, which that portion is kind of Jesus, right? The ideal man. He is sort of the Word. Then when human beings spoke and when they told of God, they became man. They were not man before the speaking. And so that's the real, what's actually happening, creation that I see. So you can still hold the view that man evolved and so on, and it doesn't contradict this. The two are reconcilable if you are thinking in terms of metaphors, because man was just animal before the spoken word and before God. Really, the spoken word and God, I'm sure, were very, very close together, if not at the same moment. It's one of the first things that we did as verbal animals, intelligent animals, is to create this idea of a God. And so when we did that, we became man. And so without the word, we would not be men. We were born in that moment. We did not exist. It's a little abstract, but I think maybe this will help you understand creationism versus evolution in a little more nuanced way, right? All right. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was good. It was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a sixth day. So that's the conclusion. Now notice here that where's the food for the plants? What, they don't get food? I mean, of course we know that they feed on the lower order, right? They feed on the water and the light. The two things that God created first. The light and the water. That is what feeds our food, and our food's food. So, yeah, it's and obviously, in terms of survival and thriving and reproducing, food is one of the most critical things. And for most of our history, that was what we spent a ton of time doing before the agricultural revolution. We spent most of our time looking for food, growing food. It's just a huge part of our life. And so, of course, this is going to be included in this first chapter is, the sustenance, the basic sustenance for our bodies. And it's not entire, the spiritual is wrapped up in this too, because all of this encompasses God. And so if you just divorce spiritual and physical, you're not getting the point, right? It's all one. And we should have reverence for our food. We should give thanks to God when we feast. I also think we should fast in order to remember that this is a gift for us. It's here to be used for our benefit. Now, of course, what does this all mean? What are you talking about? I'm talking about ways of thinking about the Bible that are useful for us, but also don't completely alienate you, because the arguments have been made. The arguments for evolution, the arguments against creationism, these have all been made before, and by smart people. Well, I guess you could call them smart in a way, and they're kind of irrefutable. We don't have the evidence to say that there's for sure a God, and there's certainly some things that seem contradictory about God, which we can get to in other episodes and so on. We're getting late in the tooth, but yeah, just to wrap up, this all fits together as a holistic way for living your life. So I think that you can embrace religion and also use that as a way to enhance philosophy. The two are not separate and irreconcilable. So I hope that was enlightening for you. And let me know what you think of this first episode. Some of these chapters, like in Kings or Chronicles, it's pretty boring. So I might condense a couple chapters together. We'll see. The main thing is, though, I'm going to go faster than Jordan Peterson, I hope, but not too fast, because there's really a lot there. Not to the point where I have to pick it apart and say, oh, here's this analogy of a cafe and what. Also, thing with Peterson is he kind of skirted around, do you really believe in God? And I'm not skirting around that. I'm telling you straight up what I believe, and it depends on what. So thank you very much. This podcast was recorded on December 2nd, 2019. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you again.